You have been well trained. Okay, welcome. It's very nice to be back here again. I think the last time was in the first Scrum gathering with Jeff Sutherland and Nakasa. So, that's one of the biggest problems is understanding why. The other problem is getting your translation course anchored up, but we're good now. And the other problem we've got at the moment, we have lots of frameworks that are meant to help us solve all of our problems. Do you have the saying, a silver bullet solution? So we say silver bullet, it's like magic. It will solve all your problems. And each one promises they have the solution for us. We had Scrum, and then Kanban is better. We had safe, scaling agile, but then less is less safe. We have Scrum at scale. And all of the time, there are more and more frameworks. The other problem is there are lots of methods and practices. I love this photo, which the translators this morning said to me, "Ha, that is the Tokyo subway map. Very cool." Deloitte mapped out all of the agile practices onto your subway map, which is kind of funny. I started early in Agile, and the promise of Agile was it was simple. We're not very simple anymore, are we? And if you think about what happens, we have design thinking with the promise that we will help you build the right thing. We have Agile, which is about building the thing right. And the problem with that is we have what I call left loop thinkers. There's a big focus on deep discovery. But often we get stuck in analysis. We try to come up with a perfect plan. And then right loop thinkers. We can deliver features fast. How many managers tell us we want to do Agile? We get more features faster. Yahoo Japan, in the early days, I think I did one of the first Scrum classes. Yes, it was at Yahoo Japan, and that was the big messaging at the time. We can give you more features faster. The problem is we risk building the wrong things faster, right? So we talk about fail fast. Failing fast is better than failing slowly, but it's still failing, right? We jump in, we build a coffee, when in fact that wasn't the right solution. Do we really want more features faster? Who wants more buttons on their remote control? Or do we want the outcomes that matter? I love this photo. This was designed by a guy. He went to his grandmother, and she was so confused. All she wanted to do was to change the channel and change the volume, so he taped it up. To me, that's usability, right? UX, the best. What we need is balance. when you're out of balance, things won't work so well. We want to understand what is the right thing to build and why, and we want to validate and test it out rapidly. This is the Mobius loop. It's a very simple idea. It is to make sure we achieve balance between discovery and delivery. There are three parts: the discovery loop, the options pivot. So the discovery is why we're doing this. The option pivot is the potential possible solutions. I don't use the word requirements anymore. Who has met or heard of Jeff Patton? Jeff Patton is an agile usability guy. And Jeff had a great story. He said his first job as a developer, and they said, "Jeff, here is a requirement, go build it." And Jeff said, "Okay, yes, why do you want it?" And they said, "Jeff, just go build it." And he said, "Yes, but why?" And they said, "Jeff, just go build it. It's a requirement." And he realized requirement simply meant shut up, right? Go build it. So if it's a requirement, we have to build it. But we don't know if it's any good. It's simply a guess. Or if you want to sound smarter, call it a hypothesis. We're good to go. And the delivery loop is where a lot of us are today in the Agile community. We're very focused on a lot of delivery, but we're not always building the right thing. Have you heard that saying, what you measure is what you get? And what you measure is all you'll get. So our measurements drive behavior. If you're measuring story points, features delivered, milestones achieved, they're about activity and about outputs. They're not about the outcomes. If we measured outputs and rewarded people, the person who built the most buttons on the remote control would make the most money. Instead, the people who build less can achieve the outcomes. Kero and I were talking, hello Kero, the other night, and we agreed we should all aspire to being very, very lazy. Lazy people build less outputs to reach the outcomes. Yeah? My best automation engineer ever, Gwen, she would get to work late. She would sit and read the paper. She would eventually do a little bit of work, and then she'd talk to people all day. And she was one of the best people ever. She was the laziest person, so she automated everything. Right? Very good. We want laziness. Behind this, we always start, you can start anywhere, but typically we start with why. What is the problem? Why is it a problem? The problem when I asked was, we want a coffee to wake up. But the real issue was to help you learn. Right? We create measurable outcomes by making them very clear. This creates the destination we want to get to. This is like setting your compass, so you know we want to get there, but we don't tell people how. with the different options. So options are alternatives, different ways you could possibly reach the outcomes. But we don't know until we deliver something, we run experiments. What's the simplest, cheapest thing we can do? And then we measure, did we achieve the outcomes, not just more outputs? Mobius is a navigator. It's not another framework. It's to help you create your own journeys. There are many practices. I have cards with, I don't know, at least 150. Kira says too many. Yeah, it's a big card deck. But there's always more frameworks, more practices. That's not the point. We choose the ones that work for us. And you use Mobius to create your own journey. I use this very, very differently depending on what you need. But we follow a simple pattern. Understand why, set the direction, create options, and then test them rapidly. The name Mobius, it comes from some German mathematics professors, and it's a continuous loop. Many processes think very linear, right? You start, you stop. When our software, our products reach people, that is the beginning of the journey. We don't stop. You have to use the feedback loop. And Mobius is, do you know the saying, double loop learning? The first loop, you try to solve the problem. The other loops, you're trying to understand and create the system to make this work. So I'll tell you some simple stories to see it in action. This is my friend Jeff, and at the time he was an engineering manager at Google, and I'd shown him Mobius, and he said, I want to use it for life hacking. I want to see if I can use it to help me fix my life. And I was like, okay, sounds weird, but why not? So we started with the problem. He says, I don't like my job anymore. He'd come from a startup where they were very agile. They released every 2 weeks. Then when they entered, Google is like Yahoo, these big companies. Some areas are amazing. You know, Google can have 4-second builds. Other areas are very, very slow and maybe not as agile, right? So they're like countries. So you hear different stories. But he said the problem is we went to 6 monthly releases. It was very slow. And as an engineer, what matters to me is to have autonomy, right? I want to be able to help make decisions, and it didn't feel that way after a startup. So I asked him questions, what was happening? And he said, well, I get paid a lot of money, but I'm very stressed. I don't have time. I'm so busy to spend time with friends, family. He said I could retire to the Philippines, where he was from, but I love travel and I wouldn't have as much money. And we talked about the impact. Why was this problem a problem for him? And he said, my job is so busy, I can't travel. I don't sleep enough, right? Jeff's a big guy. So he was worried because he had no time to exercise, he was eating bad food, and if he didn't deal with the stress, his family had heart attack risk. So the job was a problem for him, and out of it, he didn't just need a new job, he had to choose something that would help him achieve his outcomes. So the outcomes for him: reduce stress, and we said, how would we measure that? Well, I wanted to try and sleep 8 hours instead of, say, 5 hours. He would wake up in the night worrying about work and not sleep. He wants to improve his health. He wants to reduce his weight, and he wants to travel. He needs 6 weeks vacation. In America, 2 weeks is standard, right? So he had no time. What is it in Japan? Standard. Anyone know? How long do you get standard vacation?
1 week.
For 1 week? 1 week. 1 week. But I see Japanese tourists everywhere. I'm from New Zealand. You're everywhere. Do you just go without people noticing? That's crazy. Okay. Financial security. He needed to earn at least $100,000 per year. He lives in Silicon Valley. It's expensive. And we wanted to track his progress. If you don't track things, it's hard to know if you've made a difference. So he said, my baseline for sleep is 5 hours. My target is 8. He did the same for his weight. I won't go through all of these. His travel target from 2 weeks to 6, and to be able to get more financial security. So once we understand what we're tracking, it generates ideas. How could we achieve Jeff's goals? He could get another similar job. He thought about becoming an agile coach. Yeah? Maybe you all agile coaches could take more holidays, yeah? Good idea. Or he could retire. So which one do you do first? Well, what he did was he said, let's compare them. These are my options. And these are my outcomes. To be able to travel, reduce bad stress, improve my health, financial security. And the director of engineering, not very good for travel, very stressful, doesn't really help his health, but it's good financially, so he gives it a score. And he did that for the other ones. But he didn't know. He had question marks, right? So we don't. We should say, we really don't know the answer until we test it. I often get managers saying to me, I know this is a good idea. Have you heard the term hippo? Like, you know, hippopotamus? Huh? Hippo, do you heard that one? Stands for highest paid person's opinion. Hey, that was English. I heard that translation. And they would say, I know this is a good idea. And I say to them, do you really know or you think you know? If you haven't tested it, you don't know. So we run experiments, right? What can we do quickly and cheaply? So JF wanted to check, would retirement be great or boring? And would he like to be an agile coach? So what he did was he actually quit his job and he went to the Philippines for 3 months. Then he had arranged to do a coaching consulting engagement for 3 months when he got back. And he measured what happened against his goals. And then he worked out, what did he learn? He found that retirement was really, really boring and he missed his friends. he also found that coaching was risky. He was promised a contract, then it didn't come through. So coaching is a lot of work or no work, right? So it was very risky. And then he said, as I come around the loop, I'm going to adapt. What do I do next time? Life happened. His brother had a baby, so he had a new niece. Then all of his best friends, who had thought about going to the Philippines, moved down to Los Angeles. So even with the best laid plans, everything else changed. So then he had to go back around and say, what do I do differently? And what he did was he ended up finding a new startup company in Silicon Valley. They do what they call open holiday policy. You can take as many holidays as you like, as long as your manager agrees and you do the work. So now Jeff can actually travel 6 weeks a year. He doesn't earn as much money as he would have at Google, but the trade-off for his life was much, much better. And he had time to start a travel startup with a friend so they can take tours, get paid some money for it. So now he has lost weight, he's a lot healthier, he's very happy. And if he hadn't have done this, he would have probably got a similar job to what he had before because he hadn't understood what would drive it. So that's a very, very simple example. Do you want another example? No, it's okay. This one is different. I worked with a big healthcare company in Washington, D.C. And we were setting up systems to help the software for hospitals. So part of the story is off of that. So a really big problem is what we call hospital-acquired infections. These, you go into a hospital to have an operation or you're sick, you acquire an infection in hospital. In America, 1.7 million people get these infections per year. 6% of those people die from the infections. It kills more people than AIDS, breast cancer, and car accidents. It's crazy, right? 250 people a day. That's like a plane full of people crashing and everyone dying every single day. You know how many people die of shark attacks? 6. But we're scared of sharks. You know how many people die from corks? You know in bottles, the corks? Yeah. Like 25 people die a year from bottle corks. That was irrelevant, but funny to me. What it means for the hospitals. Medicare in America, Medicaid, said they would no longer pay for these infections for hospitals in 2008. So hospital stays increase by 17 days and 98,000 people die per year. And it costs $40 billion in the US alone. So when you start with this problem, you think, well, it's pretty obvious. Bacteria gets to the hospital and it spreads. So we use the Mobius loop to figure out what is happening. So we start with the outcomes. What do we want to track and measure? Ultimately, we want to reduce preventable hospital-acquired infections. 70% are preventable, right? They shouldn't happen. And we want to reduce patient deaths. The benefit, or the more business outcomes, we want to reduce hospital stays. We want to reduce costs. And we want to improve the hospital's reputation. We can add our trackers. So we want to get down that 70% from, say, 10% of patients who get the infections. We want to bring that down to 3%. We want to reduce the deaths, preventable deaths down. We want to bring down the stays in hospital. And the big benefit, why hospitals will pay for this, is to be able to save a lot of money, right? Save $1 million a year and improve their reputation in the hospital rankings. This was interesting. You have to see now, how do infections reach hospitals? So people who come in to emergency bring in bacteria. There's a lack of screening. You don't know who has the bacteria. And something hospitals started doing to make more money, they had outpatients, so you go to the hospital to be seen instead of doctors. This actually can raise up the amount of bacteria. We also want to know, how do the infections spread through hospitals? Hospital staff carry the bacteria. This is the greatest reason for the infections, the hospital staff themselves. Poor waste disposal, people throwing things away, but they're uncovered, they spread through the hospital. And not cleaning the equipment. When you test the instruments, you test the benches around, there's a lot of bacteria. Even doctors would wear ties, yeah? So they think they look very professional with the ties. The ties themselves, when they lean over, they're like a germ magnet. They're like filled with bacteria when they test them. Isn't that disgusting? So now we think, how do we fix the problem? It seems really obvious, right? How do you fix it? Well, we want to reduce the bacteria entering the hospital, reduce the spread, and reduce the bacteria on surfaces of things. So why don't we screen incoming patients? Let's see who has it. Let's isolate the infected patients. Maybe, why don't we just get staff to wash their hands, right? A lot of staff, that's one of the big reasons, is they do not wash their hands enough. So we'll tell them to. And we'll clean surfaces better. Very obvious, yeah? Job done. All good? But we go in and we decide, we'll do some more research. Who's solved this problem before? So in our people using things like Scrum or Kanban, in your queue of work, your product backlog, we don't just implement things. We don't just build things and push it to customers. We do one of three things. We can do some research, right? Investigation. We can run experiments, and we can implement. REI, research, experiment, or implement. So we can screen our patients in an experiment. We can isolate them. And why not just do a campaign? Everyone wash your hands. Everyone clean surfaces. So this is what the team at the hospital starts to do. So we measure, do we make a difference? Did we reduce the bacteria? And if we do all of those things, like the coffee, we could keep you awake, but you have to measure the primary outcome, which is, did we reduce the infections? Did we save lives? Because sometimes the bacteria goes down, but that wasn't the problem. So you have to measure both. Then what did we learn? We learned that another hospital would give out Starbucks cards, $10 cards, to get people to wash their hands. So our team thinks that's a really good idea. We learned that copper used to be used very long time ago for surfaces, and it's a natural antibacterial. I think it kills over 95% of germs just using copper materials. We ran an experiment and we found that there's some really high-risk patients. I read a study saying that Americans carry more bacteria than people in Europe. So if you're sick and you go to a hospital in, say, Amsterdam, if they see you're an American, they immediately isolate you. They don't let you around the other patients. Better. So be careful of those Americans in the audience. Keep away from them. Yeah, disease-ridden. They ran this wash your hands campaign. They said everybody must wash their hands. And what they found is people don't wash their hands. Right? It's really interesting. Doctors think they wash their hands if you ask them 70% of the time, but they don't. I'll tell you why soon. And they found that some surfaces are difficult to clean, right? The reason they don't get cleaned is it's very hard to do. They're built badly, so there are a lot of areas for bacteria. The staff don't have time, that's why they don't clean them. So it's a more complex problem, right? This is real life. So we adapt. We come around the loop. Now we choose what to do again. We now say, well, let's research the patients at high risk. We find out they're Americans. We might isolate them. We're going to try to do the Starbucks card to reward people to wash their hands. We're going to make copper replace benches and use one piece. Anything with joins, right, creates cracks. So we create seamless, new equipment, one piece. So we redesign everything. And we implement. We start tracking what we call bacteria spread in hospital. So we can tag equipment and see where is it going. And we come up with new ideas. We start filtering our patients. We have the rewards and education. I won't spend too long on this. And a funny thing happens with the Starbucks card. So these surgeons, they earn, I don't know, sometimes $1 million a year. They have a lot of money. When they saw a robot coming around to monitor them, so they get their $10 Starbucks card, they would run. They would run and wash their hands so they could get their $10 Starbucks card. Hand washing goes up over 80%, which is good. But it turns out, when people are watched, they will wash their hands more. Doctors think they wash their hands 70% of the time. In reality, if they're watched, it's 40% of the time. If they're not watched, 9% of the time. So when you go to the hospital, make sure doctors wash their hands. So when no one was watching, the hand washing went right back down. So everybody felt they were successful with the cards, but as soon as they weren't watched, same problem. The copper worked well though, so they started rolling that out throughout the hospital. We know about the US citizens, we isolate them. and we adapt. Fear factor. So this is a really brilliant story. This hospital in Los Angeles, Cedars-Sinai, they got a petri dish, and they asked doctors, they surprised them, and they had to put their hand in the petri dish. And then they let it sit for 1 week and showed the bacteria that grows. Right? Disgusting. Then they made a screensaver. And that is everywhere in the hospital, on all the monitors. You know what happened? The hand washing went to over 90%. Very cool story. This is so ugly, right? But all these hospitals around the world have asked for that screensaver so they can use it now. So that is our world. Our world is about solving complex problems and going around the loop multiple times. The first time we thought we had the answer. Go wash your hands. But people don't want to. So we have to find a way to get people to wash their hands. So I think almost time to wrap up. Okay. I'm just going to show you a few examples of where this Mobius loop has been used. Very different. The first one is Peace Through Prosperity. It's a non-profit organization. They go into Pakistan and they run a 5-day, what they call MBA. They get people who sell, like fruit on the side of the road. They cut hair on the side of the road. They're very, very poor. So Kubir, who's up there, who runs the organization, he thinks that radicalization and terrorism is not a religious issue. It's a socio-economic issue. What happens is these very poor people have to borrow money. They borrow money from people, loan sharks, and they can never pay it back. When they cannot pay it back, their recruiters from Al-Qaeda, terrorist organizations, come round and they say, give me your sons, you'll have no debt, right? And this poverty causes all sorts of issues. So what they do is they use Mobius problem solving, and they use Agile, and they teach these people how to improve their businesses, right? So when their economic status improves, they no longer get taken advantage of by the recruiters. This is 2 weeks ago in London. So this is Google Apogee Cloud. So they're using Mobius for helping them design their own work, a very different way to the one before. And this is an interesting story. This is Red Hat. Anyone work at Red Hat? Huh. So Tim Beattie is in the innovation labs. And he found that they needed a way to bring all of the design thinking with all of the different DevOps, Agile, Kanban they were using together. And they used Mobius as a way to create customer journeys using Mobius. So all of these different practices get confusing, so they use Mobius to stitch it together. This is, Mobius is open source, and it's very community driven. This is the Open Practice Library, and they take all of their practices and use it with the foundation of culture How do we get people to collaborate, to work together? And one quick story to finish with. I love this story. There's a good TED talk, and it's an architect, Alistair Parvin. He talks about architecture by the people, for the people. Their company was hired by an old Victorian school in the United Kingdom. These Victorian architecture is very narrow, right? The rooms are very thin and narrow, and they have very narrow corridors, hallways. And the school said, we have a problem. When the school bell rings, the children come out of class, and the corridors are very narrow. So they start taking a long time to get to class, and they start bullying and pushing and fighting. And it's a big problem, so we know it's going to cost maybe £20 million. We want you to redesign the building so we don't have this problem. Make the corridors wider. So Alistair and his team, if they'd been normal architects, would have gone in, done exactly that. Instead, they watched what happens. They go out and they see the school bell rings. All of the children pour out, fighting, bullying, slow. And they said, let's try an experiment. They went out and they bought individual school bells, small bell. They turned off the main bell. They gave it to each teacher, and the teacher would start the bell at the break, and they were never perfectly on time. So all the students came out staggered slightly differently, and the problem was solved for £750. Right? So this is true outcome thinking as opposed to output thinking. One of the things I work with is people doing outcome-based contracts. It's an emergent field, and the idea is that instead of getting paid for time or a lot of features, we get paid when we deliver outcomes, right? So instead of making your money, they could say, if we solve your problem, right? Maybe for one day's work, which it was, we can charge you 10% of what you save. They could have made £2 million in a day. That would be very cool. Something to think about. All right. Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございました。So we have several minutes to have the question. Okay. じゃあ、ご質問とかございましたら、今の時間にぜひどうぞ。挙手いただければスタッフが走ります。はい。
私は日本でプロダクトマネージャーやプロダクトオーナーの支援をしています。一つ質問があります。最近アジャイルの文脈で、学習をしてそこから素晴らしいアウトカムを見つけてビジネスにつなげましょうというディスカッションは数多くされているんですけれども、日本の経営陣やプロダクトマネージャー、プロダクトオーナーは全てのアウトカムの候補に対して開発側に全部検証してでそこから候補を絞り込むというのはとても非効率に見えるという、疑問を持っています。よく相談にあるのがその開発チームを使ってアウトカムに対する学習を手当たり次第何でもするのではなくもう少し、企画の段階でアウトカムの候補を絞り込むいい方法があるのであればそれを プロダクトマネージャーやプロダクトオーナーが中心になって組織的にプロセスをうまく前に進めたいという相談をよくされますが、そういった、質問に対してどういうふうな答えを出していますか？
So one of the more successful implementations we had was, it was actually a Japanese travel company, Mickey Travel. They do business to business, the back-end hotels and things. And one of the head of technology, she'd been to one of my product classes and said, can you come in and teach this Mobius stuff? So we did, and we got in the room, I think there were 2 technical people. Everybody else was management, so sales, the head of the company, everybody was in the room. And it was interesting, and I went, okay. So we used the Mobius loop, and we said, now pitch all the different projects or programs that you want funding for, because they didn't have enough developers, too many people deciding ideas, not enough people doing it. And so they had to come up with why they were doing it, what were the outcomes, and how would we measure success. So I made them do it. I trained the upper level in outcome-based thinking. There's a big move at the moment to this idea of intent-based leadership. There's a video, David Marquet, Turn the Ship Around, and he talks a lot about this in military and how we want to have leadership set the direction and a strong sense of purpose, but let the people figure it out. So I think one of the things we do very not so well in Agile is we do it in the middle. We do it for the developers, but we don't help people in leadership with how they can make this work. It's a system. It breaks if you only fix one piece of it and not all of it. So I make it their problem to solve. So I say to them, you need to come up with, what are the outcomes? We will help you, but you need to be very, very clear, what do we need to measure? Now, they're often business people. This is the way they think. I love working with them because they'll say to me, well, we need to reach new markets. We need new customers. We need to generate revenue. We need to stop having people leave us, whatever it is. Then all of those set a high-level strategic Mobius loop with outcomes that then the teams can say, if you want to retain more customers, we'll work out why they're leaving in the first place. We will investigate. We will create our own outcomes that will help deliver yours, right? So we turn the problem around. We turn it back to them to say, we'll generate things that move your numbers. You don't impose them on us, what to do. We'll figure out the best way. Now, I did this once many years ago at Skype, when it was still Skype, not owned by Microsoft. And one of the product managers had the same problem. So we got teams together, generated outcomes. He delivered, with a lot less work, so much more revenue for Skype. It was so incredibly successful that when they had all the product managers have to show that they have to show what they've been working on for the last, say, 3 months. Everybody else had 25 slides, right? We have delivered these features, these features, these features. Jamie has 1. We delivered these outcomes. We generated £24 million. It took us this much investment, done. The next day, he was promoted to head of all the product managers. They don't care how you do it. They care about the impact, the money. So we have to change our language. In Agile, we tell managers they have to look at our backlogs. They have to track features delivered and points delivered, change it, move away from it, train them up. They understand this. They like outcomes a lot more because their bonuses get tied to making money and things, right? So we show them to look good, they're happy. Yeah? Easy. Maybe. Other questions?
何質問質問ありますか。
本質の質問にならないのかもしれませんが、病院の話で、手を洗わない医師のパーセンテージっていうのが出てて結構びっくりしたんですけど、なんかこう計測するっていうのは非常に大事だと思いますが、計測される対象が恥だとか隠したいようなものっていうのは計測するのが非常に難しいように思いますけども、そういったものはどういうなんか計測するコツみたいなものがあるんでしょうか。
What I've noticed, last night over dinner, we were talking about poka-yoke, you know, in a way, idiot proofing. But I like things that track, new tracking methods. For example, I saw a video where this television presenter in England, she was very, very big. And she said, I cannot lose weight. I have a slow metabolism. Since I've been a child, I eat healthy food, I eat fruit, vegetables, not too much, no problem. So they get her to drink this smart water. And for a week, she has to write down what she eats. At the end of the week, they added it up. She thought she ate 1,700 calories a day. The smart water tracks it. She actually ate 3,400 calories a day. So it wasn't her metabolism, it was in her mind. So new tracking. My husband down the back worked on healthcare vector tracking. So they tag everything, so it becomes part of the system. So having what we call situational awareness, where we understand what's happening around us, is very important to doing this. If you don't have the feedback, so if product managers push things out without measuring the impact, it's like driving with a blindfold on. This data exists, but we don't give it to our product or our management people. We track the wrong things. So you need to create smart tracking as part of this journey, and it takes a long time to do. This will be doing it manually, getting better, tracking things. Even defining measurements is very difficult. It takes work, but it makes things very clear. Then you can start automating it, because the doctors, when they're watched, but if you randomly check their hands, then you can see the samples show us what's really going on. So we need to keep tracking those things. Does that help? No? Okay. I have long answers, don't I? So. Another question? Or you finished? Okay. I have exhausted you all. We can now go have a break. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございました。